FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. and really around the country this week, because a lot of the news that's going to impact agricultural policy in the next couple of months is not necessarily happening in Washington, D.C. this week. Just one chamber in town. The House of Representatives is in town, was in town for a couple of days this week. Senate went on Easter recess at the end of last week. And so the big news in regards to GMO labeling is not necessarily happening in Washington this week.
Oh, exactly right, Spencer. It's actually happening in the C-suites in places like Battle Creek in Minneapolis, the home of the world's largest food companies. That's where they have been deciding and announcing one right after the other in recent days that they plan to go forward with really what is historic, and that is relabeling their products to say whether they have genetically engineered ingredients or not.
So the announcements have come so far. There was one earlier this year from Campbell's Soup. Right. Also saw in the last week, basically right after we got done recording this video last week, there was an announcement from General Mills. So we missed you last week. We apologize for that. But General Mills, and then also have heard from Mars, Kellogg's, and Conagra Foods this week. So really within the last week, there's been 4 major food companies make this announcement. But Phil, something that's important to note is that they're not saying that they're interested in reformulating their products to get rid of the GMOs that are already there. They're just adding disclosure to their labels.
Right, and Spencer, this has always been the big concern from the agricultural community and the industry about mandatory on-package GMO labeling. And that's has been that if you put the words genetic engineering or bioengineering, whatever, GMOs, on the label, then companies will come under consumer pressure, and that they will decide just not to use those ingredients, and that they will start sourcing some either substitutes if they can, or non-biotech versions. So we've been asking each one of these companies that very question: what do you plan to do? Do you plan to reformulate in any way from GMOs? And most of these companies, 3 of the 5 companies have told us directly that no, they have no plans to reformulate. For consumers that want a non-biotech product, they have they have non-GMO, they have organic. Of course, organic foods from organic producers are not allowed to use genetically engineered seeds. And another company, General Mills, didn't say flatly that it wouldn't, but they said they had no plans to, and but they didn't close the door if there's consumer demand for it.
So at this point, the foods are the same. It's the packaging that's going to undergo some slight changes. And Phil, the action in this right now is in the Senate, because the House passed a labeling bill last summer, but they're still waiting for some kind of equivalent bill from the Senate. And you had a chance to catch up with House Agriculture Committee Ranking Member Collin Peterson of Minnesota, and he kind of had some thoughts and a little bit of skepticism on this issue as well.
Yeah, he made a couple of interesting points. One, he had talked to the CEO of General Mills this week about what they plan to do, and what we just talked about in terms of reformulating, or not in this case reformulating. And so he was feeling better about the lack of a possible impact of labeling. Maybe it wasn't going to be that big a deal after all. And if there's anybody who in Congress who has reason to be concerned, it's to be Collin Peterson. There are a lot of corn and soybeans and sugar beets growing up in western Minnesota, where he's from. But the other point he made was interesting. Is he is, as you say, is becoming less optimistic that the Senate is going to be able to pass anything that doesn't require some kind of on-package label wording or symbol. A couple of things that are a non-starter for him, and frankly a non-starter for the industry. And so we'll see. It's we've got the July coming. We have these companies announcing that they're going to go forward with labeling in compliance with the Vermont law. It's hard to see where the pressure is going to be on the Senate to do something that doesn't, less than that doesn't require something on the label, since these companies are saying they're already going to go forward.
And again, it's important to note that this Vermont GMO labeling bill goes into effect July 1st. And so a lot of these companies are basically making preparations now so that they will be in full compliance by the time July 1st rolls around and won't have to face any of these penalties in Vermont.
Right, they're heavy penalties that they face. And these companies, it's also important to point out, they're not saying that the Congress shouldn't do anything, quite the opposite. They really want Congress to pass a national law and national standards, rather than, Vermont has a law, other states can pass laws as well. They have, and there are different definitions of genetic engineering that's been proposed. Some would cover different products. Vermont, most notably, does not cover dairy products, milk probably being the biggest agricultural commodity that comes out of Vermont. So the companies still say they need a national standard. And it's also important to point out that while these companies say right now they're not going to reformulate, that doesn't mean that some time down the road they might, especially if they come under enough pressure and are worried about losing a significant number of consumers.
So we try and focus about the news that happens out of Washington, D.C. in this video series, but sometimes, quite frankly, the news elsewhere really is going to have a heck of an impact as far as what goes on in Washington, D.C., and that is certainly the case this week. Just as a bit of a reminder, they are on Easter recess right now, so we will not be having one of these videos next week, but we'll be sure to pay attention to all of the important agricultural policy news to keep you informed, and we'll be sure to be posting that at Agri-Pulse.com. For Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.